They say blood is thicker than water, but in my family, money was the only thing that held any weight. And if you didn't have it, or look like you came from it, you were invisible. Actually, invisible would have been an upgrade. I was about to become something much worse, the help. They wanted me to be invisible. They wanted me to be the help at my own sister's wedding. But they didn't know that one act of kindness towards a stranger in the rain was about to change everything. Get ready, because when the helicopter lands, the tables don't just turn, they flip. I remember exactly where I was when the call came that changed my life. It was 4 a.m. on a Tuesday, and the air in my small industrial kitchen in Oakland smelled like burnt sugar and exhaustion. I was scraping a baking sheet, trying to salvage a batch of caramelized onions for a corporate lunch order I had to deliver in 4 hours. My back throbbed with a dull, familiar ache, and my hands were raw from scrubbing dishes. Then my phone started vibrating against the stainless steel counter. I wiped my hands on my apron and looked at the screen. The name flashing there made my stomach turn. It was my mother. She never called at 4 a.m. In fact, she rarely called me at all unless she needed something to look perfect for her social media followers. My thumb hovered over the decline button. I knew I should let it go to voicemail. I knew that answering that phone was like opening a door to a room filled with toxic gas. But the little girl inside me, the one who still just wanted her mommy to tell her she was good enough, pressed answer. Nia, her voice wasn't panicked, it was annoyed. Why did it take you 3 rings to pick up? You know I have anxiety. I rubbed my eyes, fighting the urge to hang up right then and there. It's 4 a.m., Mama. I'm working. Is everything okay? Is Dad okay? Your father is fine. It's the wedding, she snapped. We have a crisis, a catastrophe, really. And since you're the only one in this family who insists on doing menial labor, we need you. I froze. The wedding. My younger sister, Kayla, was getting married in 3 days to Julian Thorne. The Thorne family owned half the shipping containers on the West Coast. It wasn't just a wedding, it was a merger. It was the crowning achievement of my parents' lives. They had spent their entire savings and likely leveraged the house to secure this match. I, of course, hadn't received an invitation. I thought the wedding was fully planned, Mama, I said, keeping my voice steady. You hired the best catering firm in the city. They canceled, she hissed. Food poisoning took out half their staff last night. They pulled out 3 days before the wedding. We have 500 guests coming to the Villa Montalvo. Senators, tech moguls, the Thornes. If we serve them subpar food, or worse, if we don't have enough servers, we will be the laughingstock of San Francisco society. I scraped a piece of onion off the tray, trying to keep my hand from shaking. So you want me to cater it? Mama, I run a lunch delivery service. I do sandwiches and salads. I don't do 5-course plated dinners for billionaires. No, God, no, she laughed, a sharp, brittle sound that cut deeper than any knife. We found another chef. Chef Marco, he's affordable. But he doesn't have a service team. He needs waiters, servers, runners. She paused, and I felt the humiliation traveling through the phone line before she even said the words. We need you to lead the service team, Nia. You and whatever crew you work with. We need bodies in uniforms, black tie, silent, invisible. I gripped the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. You want me to serve at my own sister's wedding? You didn't invite me as a guest, and now you want me to work it. Oh, stop being dramatic, she sighed. You wouldn't have fit in as a guest anyway. You know how the Thornes are. Traditional, they appreciate a certain aesthetic. You'd be uncomfortable. Aesthetic, that was the code word. Kayla was light-skinned like our mother. Hazel eyes, loose curls, petite frame. She passed the paper bag test with flying colors. I took after our great-grandmother. Dark skin, rich like mahogany, hair that defied gravity, and a body that took up space. In my family, Kayla was the prize. I was the cautionary tale. I'm busy, Mama, I whispered. I have orders. Nia Vance, her voice dropped, becoming deadly serious. We leveraged the house for this. If this wedding is a disaster, Julian might get cold feet. If he backs out, we lose everything. We will be on the street. Do you want your parents homeless? Is your pride worth more than our survival? There it was, the guilt trap, the weapon she had honed for 28 years. I closed my eyes. I imagined the scene, me, in a waiter's tuxedo, pouring champagne for people who used to make fun of me in high school. Me, watching my sister live the fairy tale I was told I was too dark to deserve. But I loved my dad. He was weak and he let Mama run him over, but he was the only one who had ever been kind to me when I was little. I couldn't let him lose his home. Fine, I said, the word tasting like ash. I'll do it, but I charge double for rush jobs, and I want half of. Always about money with you, she muttered. Fine, be at the estate Thursday morning for prep, and Nia, do something with your hair. We want you to look presentable, not like a political statement. She hung up. I stood alone in the freezing kitchen, the silence ringing in my ears. I didn't cry. I had stopped crying over them years ago. Instead, I turned back to the baking sheet. I scraped the onions harder, channeling every ounce of rage into the metal. Before I go any further, I have to ask you something. Have you ever been the plan B for the people who are supposed to love you first? Have you ever been told you're too much or not enough simply because of how you were born? If you know this pain, if you've ever had to swallow your pride just to keep the peace, let me know in the comments right now. Tell me I'm not alone in this kitchen, because what happens over the next 3 days? I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. But trust me, you need to hear this. Because the way the universe balances the scales is terrifyingly beautiful. Thursday morning arrived with a sky the color of a bruise. A storm was brewing off the coast, threatening to ruin the outdoor ceremony, which secretly gave me a tiny sliver of satisfaction. I drove my beat-up Honda Odyssey up the winding roads of the Saratoga Hills. The Villa Montalvo was a historic mansion, a sprawling estate of white stone and Italian columns nestled in the redwoods. It screamed old money. My GPS told me to turn left at the main gate, a massive iron structure guarded by men in suits. As I approached, I rolled down my window. The guard didn't even look at me. Name, he asked. Nia Vance, I said. I'm here for the wedding prep. He checked his clipboard, he frowned, then he checked it again. Vance, like the bride? Yes, I said, keeping my eyes forward. I'm her sister. The guard looked at me. He looked at my car-dented bumper, peeling paint. Then he looked at my face. He laughed, a short, dismissive snort. Right, and I'm the King of England. Deliveries and staff go to the rear entrance, sweetheart. Take the service road around the back, don't block the driveway. I didn't argue, I didn't correct him. I just rolled up my window and drove toward the back. This was my place. The back door. The service road was narrow and bumpy, hidden behind a tall hedge so the guests wouldn't have to see the ugly reality of how their luxury was produced. I parked next to a dumpster that smelled of rotting lilies and grease. I got out, smoothing down my black t-shirt and jeans. I had brought my uniform in a garment bag, a stiff white button-down, black slacks, and a black bow tie, the uniform of invisibility. I walked into the kitchen through the loading dock. It was chaos. Chefs were shouting, sous chefs were chopping vegetables with machine gun speed, and in the center of it all stood my mother, Oilia Vance. She looked impeccable. A cream-colored power suit, pearls, hair sprayed into an immobile helmet of perfection. She was screaming at a terrified florist about the shade of the orchids. She turned and saw me. Her eyes narrowed. No hug, no hello. You're late, she said, checking her diamond watch. 7 minutes late, do you want to ruin us? Traffic, mama, I said, setting my bag down. Where do you want me? Start polishing the silverware. It's tarnished. The thorns have eyes like hawks. If they see a water spot, they'll think we're trash. She stepped closer to me, her voice dropping to a whisper so the other staff wouldn't hear. She reached out and tugged at a curl of my hair that had escaped my tight bun. And tuck this in, she hissed. You look wild. Listen to me carefully, Nia. We told the Thorns that Kayla is an only child. It just simplified things. So for this weekend, you are the head of staff. Your name is Nee, not Nia, just Nee. Understood? My stomach dropped. Wasn't just that I wasn't invited. They had erased me. To the family they were marrying into, I didn't exist. You told them Kayla is an only child, I repeated, my voice hollow. Mama, Julian has met me once 5 years ago. He won't remember, she waved her hand dismissively. You were heavier then, and you were wearing glasses. Just keep your head down, serve the wine, and don't make eye contact. Do this for your sister. Where is Kayla? I asked, looking around. In the bridal suite. Getting her facial. Don't disturb her, she needs her rest. I nodded slowly. Okay, I'll polish the silver. I spent the next 6 hours in a windowless pantry rubbing polishing paste onto 300 silver forks. My fingers turned gray from the tarnish. The smell of the chemicals made me dizzy. Every fork I polished felt like I was scrubbing away a piece of my own dignity. Around 2 p.m., the kitchen door swung open. Kayla walked in. She was glowing. Literally. Her skin looked like it had been buffed by angels. She was wearing a silk robe with the word bride written in rhinestones on the back. She was followed by 2 giggling bridesmaids, both blonde, both thin as rails. Kayla stopped when she saw me in the pantry. Her smile faltered for a second, then returned, sharper this time. Oh, look, she said to her friends. The help has arrived. The bridesmaids giggled. They didn't know who I was. They just thought I was Nee, the head of staff. Nia, Kayla stepped into the pantry. She looked at the pile of silverware. Make sure you get the knives too. Julian is very particular about his steak knives. Hello, Kayla, I said, not looking up. Congratulations. Don't give me that attitude, she snapped. You should be thanking us. We're paying you, aren't we? Dad said he's giving you $500 for the weekend. That's probably more than you make in a week with those sad little sandwiches. $500. For 3 days of 16-hour shifts, it was less than minimum wage. I'm doing this for the family, Kayla, I said, finally meeting her eyes. Not for the money. Family, she scoffed. If you cared about this family, you would have lost weight and gotten a real corporate job like Dad asked. You're an embarrassment, Nia. That's why you're in the pantry. Just stay out of the photos, okay? The photographer is very expensive. She turned on her heel and walked out, her silk robe swishing behind her. Come on, girls, let's go practice our poses. I sat there holding a silver knife. I saw my reflection in the blade, distorted, dark, angry. I wanted to walk out. I wanted to take my car and drive until the gas ran out. But then I thought about my dad. Despite everything, I couldn't let him end up on the street, so I wiped the knife. I put on my white shirt. I tied my bow tie. And I became the ghost they wanted me to be. The rehearsal dinner was held that night in the solarium. It was supposed to be intimate, only 50 people, the inner circle. My job was to oversee the wine service. I had to stand by the wall, a bottle of expensive Cabernet in my hand, and rush forward whenever a glass was half empty. I watched them eat. I watched my parents laughing, clinking glasses with the elder Thorns. Mr. Thorne was a large man with a red face and a loud voice. Mrs. Thorne was thin, icy, and wore diamonds the size of grapes. Julian, the groom, looked bored. He checked his phone constantly under the table. Kayla was performing. That was the only word for it. She was acting the part of the doting fiancé, laughing too loud at Mr. Thorne's bad jokes, touching Julian's arm every few seconds. More wine, a voice barked. I snapped to attention. It was Julian's best man, a guy named Chad. He held up his glass without looking at me. I moved forward, wrapped the bottle in a linen napkin, and poured. Easy, sweetheart, Chad slurred. He was already drunk. Don't spill it. This shirt costs more than your car. My hand trembled slightly, but I didn't spill a drop. Enjoy, sir, I whispered. As I backed away, I heard Chad whisper to the guy next to him, check out the waitress. A bit dark for my taste, but she's got a body on her, huh? I felt bile rise in my throat. I retreated to the shadows, trying to make myself disappear into the wallpaper. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors of the solarium banged open. The wind from the storm outside rushed in, flickering the candles on the tables. Standing in the doorway was a figure that silenced the room instantly. It wasn't a guest. It was an old woman, but not a rich old woman like Mrs. Thorne. This woman looked weathered. She wore a gray wool coat that was 3 sizes too big and frayed at the hem. Her hair was wild, white strands escaping a loose, messy bun. She wore men's work boots covered in mud. She leaned on a heavy wooden cane, breathing hard as if she had walked up the entire mountain. The room went dead silent. Forks paused halfway to mouths. "Who is that?" Mrs. Thorne whispered, looking at the intruder like she was a cockroach on a wedding cake. My mother stood up, her face pale. "Security? Where is security?" The old woman stepped forward. She didn't look scared. She looked around the room, her eyes scanning every face. She looked hungry, not just for food, but for something else. I apologize," the old woman said. Her voice was scratchy like dry leaves. "My car, it broke down the hill. My phone is dead. It is freezing out there. I saw the lights." She took a shaky step toward the table. Could I trouble you for a phone and perhaps a glass of water?" It was a simple request, a human request. Mr. Thorne stood up, his napkin falling to the floor. "How did you get past the gate? This is private property." "The gate was open for the florist truck," the woman explained. She shivered, clutching her coat tighter. "Please, I am 78 years old. I cannot walk back down in the dark." My father looked at my mother. My mother looked at the Thornes. She saw the disgust on Mrs. Thorne's face. "Get out," my mother hissed. She marched toward the old woman. "This is an exclusive event. We do not have handouts for beggars. You are trespassing." "I am not begging for money," the woman said, standing a little straighter. "Just shelter, just for an hour until the storm passes." "No," Kayla chimed in from the head table. She didn't want the aesthetic ruined. "You smell like wet dog. Please leave before I call the police." The old woman looked at Kayla. She looked at her for a long, uncomfortable moment. "You are the bride?" "Yes," Kayla lifted her chin. "And I want you gone." The woman nodded slowly. "I see, beauty without grace." "A common affliction," Kayla gasped. "Excuse me." "Security," my mother screamed. 2 guards rushed in from the hallway, breathless. They grabbed the old woman by her arms roughly. "No," the word escaped my lips before I could stop it. Every head turned toward me, the waitress in the shadows. "Did the help just speak?" Chad laughed. My mother shot me a look that promised murder. "Nee," she warned. "Back to the kitchen." I looked at the old woman. The guards were dragging her toward the door. It was pouring rain outside now. Thunder cracked overhead. If they threw her out there on the dark mountain road, she could die. I couldn't do it. I couldn't just stand there. "Wait," I stepped forward, putting the wine bottle down on a side table with a loud clack. "You can't throw her out in the storm. She's elderly." "Nee," my father barked. "Do your job or get out." I looked at the old woman. Her eyes met mine. They were surprising. They weren't pleading. They were assessing, calculating. They were the color of steel. "She can stay in the kitchen," I said, my voice shaking but loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'll watch her. She can sit by the heater. She won't bother anyone, please." Mrs. Thorne wrinkled her nose. "I don't want a vagrant near my food." "She won't touch the food," I promised. "I'll make sure of it, please. It's inhumane." The room was silent. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Finally, Julian spoke up. He looked uncomfortable. "Kayla, maybe." "I mean, if she dies on the driveway, the press would have a field day. It would be bad PR for the merger." That was the magic word. PR, Mr. Thorne grunted. "Fine, get her out of sight. Put her in the back. If I see her or smell her, you're all fired." The guards let go of the woman. She stumbled. I rushed forward and caught her arm. Her coat was soaking wet, but underneath her arm felt solid, strong. "Come with me, ma'am," I whispered. My mother walked past me as I led the woman away. She leaned into my ear. "You have just cost yourself that $500, and if she steals one silver spoon, I am calling the cops on you." I ignored her. I led the stranger into the warmth of the kitchen hallway. "Thank you, child," the woman whispered, leaning on her cane. "Don't thank me yet," I muttered, guiding her toward the staff break room. "Wait until you try the coffee, it's terrible." I didn't know it then, but I had just made the most important decision of my life. I thought I was saving a helpless old lady. I had no idea that the wolf had just entered the hen house, and she was wearing wool. The heavy swinging door of the kitchen closed behind us, muffling the sounds of the laughter and clinking glasses from the solarium. The silence in the back hallway was sudden and stark. I could hear the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead and the wet squeak of the old woman's boots on the linoleum floor. I led her toward the small employee break room at the far end of the service corridor. It wasn't much, just a few folding chairs, a vending machine, and a coffee pot that smelled like burnt rubber, but it was warm. "Here," I said softly, pulling out one of the metal chairs. "Sit down. I'm going to get you something dry to wrap around your shoulders." The woman sat heavily, letting out a long rattle of a breath. She looked even smaller in the harsh kitchen light. Her gray hair was plastered to her forehead with rain, and her hands, resting on the handle of her cane, were trembling. But her eyes, as I looked closer, I realized they weren't fearful. They were sharp, observant, darting around the room, taking in every detail of the cracked tiles and the peeling paint. I ran to the supply closet and grabbed a stack of clean, white table linens that hadn't been ironed yet. I brought them back and draped them over her shivering frame. Then, I did the one thing I knew would get me fired if anyone saw. I walked to the warming oven where the chef's reserve appetizers were kept. These were the leftovers from the rehearsal dinner: lobster bites, truffle-glazed Wagyu sliders, and saffron arancini balls meant only for the VIPs. My mother would have counted every single one of them. I didn't care. I grabbed a plate, piled it high with the most expensive food in the room, and poured a bottle of sparkling water into a plastic cup. When I set the plate down in front of her, the woman didn't pounce on the food like I expected a starving person to do. She looked at the lobster, then up at me. "You realize," she said, her voice raspy but surprisingly clear, "that stealing from the master's table is a fireable offense." I let out a dry, humorless laugh as I leaned against the vending machine. "Technically, I'm not an employee, I'm family, which in my experience is a much worse position to be in." The woman picked up a slider with delicate, almost elegant fingers. She took a bite, chewed slowly, and nodded in approval. "Family," she repeated the word like it had a bad taste. "They treat you like a servant. Why do you stay? Why did you stand up for me back there when your own father wanted to throw me to the wolves?" I looked down at my scuffed work shoes. It was a question I had asked myself 1,000 times in the dark of my apartment. "Because he's still my dad," I whispered, the confession feeling heavy in the quiet room. "I keep thinking, maybe if I work hard enough, maybe if I save the day one more time, he'll look at me and see his daughter again. Not just the mistake, not just the disappointment." I looked up at her, blinking back the stinging tears. "And because nobody deserves to be thrown out in the rain just because they don't fit the aesthetic." The old woman stopped eating. She wiped her mouth with the linen cloth, her gaze intensifying. It felt like she was looking right through my skin, seeing the scars I hid from everyone. "Loyalty is a rare currency, child," she said softly. "But spent on the wrong people, it bankrupts you." Before I could ask her what she meant, the kitchen door banged open. "Nee, where are you?" It was the head chef, Marco. I jumped, my heart hammering against my ribs. "I have to go," I whispered frantically to the woman. "Stay here. If anyone comes in, just say you're waiting for. Say you're my grandmother, please. I'll be back with a blanket later." The woman gave me a small, enigmatic smile. Go on, Nia, I'm not going anywhere. I rushed back into the chaos of the kitchen, slipping back into my role as the invisible hand, the shadow in the corner. But for the rest of the night, as I poured wine and cleared plates, I felt a strange sense of calm. I wasn't just serving them anymore. I had a secret. I had done something real. The shift finally ended at 1 a.m. My feet were throbbing so hard they felt like they had their own heartbeats. The last guest had stumbled off to their room, and the kitchen staff was frantically scrubbing down the counters for the morning prep. I slipped away, grabbing a heavy wool blanket from the back of my car that I kept for emergencies, and headed straight for the break room. I half expected her to be gone. I thought she might have gotten scared and walked out into the rain, or maybe security had found her and dragged her off. But when I pushed the door open, she was still there. She was asleep in the metal chair, her head resting awkwardly against the vending machine. She looked fragile in the dim light, the lines on her face deep with exhaustion. I moved quietly, unfolding the blanket and draping it gently over her. Her eyes snapped open instantly. There was no grogginess, no confusion, just instant, sharp alertness. It made me flinch. "It's just me," I whispered, holding up my hands. "I brought you a blanket. The heat turns off in this part of the building at night." She relaxed, pulling the wool tight around her shoulders. "You are still here. I thought you would have gone home to a warm bed." "I don't have enough gas to drive back to Oakland and return by 6 a.m., I admitted, pulling up a chair opposite her. "I'll sleep in my car, I'm used to it." The woman studied me. She reached into the pocket of her oversized coat and pulled out the wrapper of the slider I had given her. It was empty. "You have a gift, Nia, that food." The flavor profile was sophisticated, but there was something else. It tasted like comfort. I smiled, a tired, genuine smile. "I didn't make those." "The head chef, Marco, did." "No," she shook her head firmly. "I watched you through the crack in the door. Marco was screaming at a sous chef. You were the one who plated it. You added a pinch of smoked paprika and a drizzle of honey to the sauce before you brought it to me. I saw you." I blushed. I didn't think anyone noticed those little things. "Marco's sauce was too acidic. It needed balance." "You run a business?" she asked. "A small one," I said, rubbing my neck. "Lunch deliveries, but my dream." My dream is a global catering line. High-end soul food fusion, bringing the food of my ancestors to tables that usually wouldn't let us sit at them. But I shrugged. Banks don't give loans to people with my credit score and my zip code. The woman nodded slowly. "Capital is a coward. It only goes where it feels safe, but vision is brave." She leaned forward, her voice dropping. "Tell me, if you had the capital, what is the first thing you would do?" We talked for an hour. I don't know why I poured my heart out to a stranger in a break room at 2 a.m. Maybe it was because for the first time in years, someone was actually listening. I told her about my business plan, about the recipes I had written down in my notebooks, about how I wanted to hire women from shelters to give them a second chance. She didn't interrupt. She just listened, her gray eyes cataloging every word. Finally, exhaustion overtook me. "I have to sleep," I said, standing up. "Are you okay here for the night? I can leave the door unlocked." "I will be fine," she said. "Thank you, Nia, for the blanket and for the conversation. It has been illuminating." "Good night," I said. "Nia," she called out just as I reached the door. I turned back. "Remember what I said about diamonds," she said softly. "They are just coal that learned how to handle the pressure. Tomorrow is going to be heavy. Don't break." I didn't know how prophetic those words would be. I slept in the backseat of my Honda for 3 hours, waking up with a stiff neck and a sense of dread. The sun was just cresting over the Saratoga Hills, painting the sky in violent shades of orange and pink. It was the wedding day. I hurried into the building, splashing cold water on my face in the staff bathroom and changing into a fresh shirt. The first thing I did was check the break room. It was empty. The blanket was folded neatly on the chair, military precision. The plate was in the trash. There was no sign that she had ever been there. A pang of disappointment hit me. I hadn't expected a goodbye, but I had hoped she was safe. I checked the hallway, but she was gone. I told myself it was for the best. If my mother had found her, it would have been a scene, but I didn't have time to dwell on it. The kitchen was a war zone. "Nee," Chef Marco screamed the moment I walked in. "The baker is stuck in traffic. The cake needs to be assembled. You have steady hands, yes. Go, fix the tears." For the next 4 hours, I was a machine. I assembled the 5-tier lemon chiffon cake. I steamed the tablecloths. I set 500 place settings, measuring the distance between the forks with a ruler to ensure they were equidistant. My family was nowhere to be seen. They were in the upper suites, getting hair and makeup done, drinking mimosas. I caught glimpses of them on social media when I took a bathroom break. Kayla posted a selfie in her robe, "Best day of my life." So blessed to be surrounded by love. I looked at my own reflection in the mirror. Dark circles under my eyes, a grease stain on my collar, invisible, surrounded by love. The caption burned. The ceremony began at 4 p.m. I wasn't allowed to watch. The staff was ordered to stay in the staging tent to prep the champagne flutes for the toast, but I couldn't help myself. I snuck out to the edge of the rose garden, hiding behind a large trellis covered in ivy. It was beautiful. I couldn't deny that. The sun was filtering through the redwoods, casting a golden glow on the white chairs. A string quartet was playing Pachelbel's canon. I saw my father walk Kayla down the aisle. He looked proud. He looked happy. He whispered something to her and she laughed. A lump formed in my throat so big I could barely breathe. I remembered when I was 6 and he walked me to my first day of school. He had looked at me like that then. When did it stop? When did I become the shame he hid in the back? I looked at Julian at the altar. He looked nervous. He kept adjusting his cufflinks. When he saw Kayla, he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. It looked like a business transaction closing. The vows were standard, for richer or poorer. I almost laughed out loud. There was no poorer in this equation. This was a merger of fortunes. "I do," Kayla said, her voice ringing clear and triumphant. "I do," Julian said. Applause erupted. Doves were released. It was picture perfect. I turned away before the tears could fall. I wiped my face aggressively. "Get it together, Nia. You're working." The reception was held on the great lawn. A massive tent with crystal chandeliers had been erected. It was suffocatingly opulent. My job was to circulate with the champagne tray. I had to weave through the crowd of senators and socialites, offering drinks and taking empty glasses. "Champagne?" I asked a group of women in shimmering gowns. They took the glasses without looking at me. They didn't even break their conversation. I was just a floating hand to them. I made my way toward the head table. I knew I should avoid my family, but I had to refill the toast glasses. My mother was holding court, laughing loudly, a glass of vintage Dom Perignon in her hand. She saw me approaching and her smile froze for a microsecond before she looked away. "Everything is perfect, Oilia," Mrs. Thorne was saying. "You really pulled it off." Although she lowered her voice, I heard a rumor about a homeless person crashing the rehearsal dinner. "I hope security has been tightened." My mother laughed nervously. "Oh, just a misunderstanding. It was handled immediately. We run a tight ship." I reached forward to pour more champagne into Mr. Thorne's glass. My hand was steady. I was a professional. But then, disaster struck. Chad, the drunk best man from the night before, bumped into me hard from behind. Stumbling, laughing at a joke someone made. "Whoa," he yelled. The impact sent me stumbling forward. The bottle of champagne in my hand slipped. It didn't shatter. That would have been too easy. Instead, it launched the liquid content straight onto Mrs. Thorne. It hit her chest. A wave of sticky, expensive alcohol soaked into her silver silk gown. The gasp that went through the tent sucked all the oxygen out of the air. The string quartet stopped playing. Mrs. Thorne stood up, screeching, "My dress." "You clumsy idiot, look what you did." I stood there, horrified. The empty bottle was still in my hand. I'm so sorry, he bumped into me. Don't you blame him, my mother screamed. She was on her feet instantly, her face purple with rage. She wasn't seeing her daughter, she was seeing her investment crumbling. You clumsy, useless girl, I told you to be careful. Kayla ran over, looking at Mrs. Thorne's ruined dress. She turned to me, her eyes filled with venom. You did this on purpose. You're jealous. You couldn't stand that today was about me, so you had to ruin it. No, Kayla, I swear. Get out, my father roared. He slammed his hand on the table. Get out of my sight, Nia. You are fired. Get off this property before I have security drag you out. The silence was deafening. 500 people were staring at me, the waitress, the screw-up, the black sheep. I looked at my father, really looked at him. I saw the fear in his eyes, fear of the Thorns, fear of losing his status. He was willing to sacrifice me publicly to save face. Something inside me broke, but it wasn't a break that shattered, it was a break that set me free. I placed the empty bottle gently on the table. I took off my bow tie. I unbuttoned the top button of my stiff white shirt. You don't have to fire me, I said, my voice surprisingly calm in the silent tent. Because I don't work for you, and I certainly don't belong to you. I turned around. I walked away from the head table. I walked down the center aisle past the staring guests, past the waiters who were looking at me with pity. I was halfway across the lawn when a sound started. It started as a low thrumming, vibrating in my chest. Thump, thump, thump. The glasses on the tables started to rattle again. The chandeliers in the tent began to sway. The wind picked up, violent and sudden, whipping the tablecloths and ruining the carefully coiffed hair of the guests. People started screaming, pointing at the sky. I looked up. Coming over the ridge of the mountains, descending like a dark angel, was a helicopter. It was sleek, midnight blue with gold lettering on the side. It was flying low, dangerously low. It wasn't a news chopper. It wasn't police. It was military-grade luxury. The helicopter hovered directly over the reception tent, blowing napkins and flowers into a chaotic whirlwind. The noise was deafening. My mother was covering her ears, screaming something I couldn't hear. The bird shifted, moving toward the open space of the lawn right where I was standing. I froze. The wind whipped my hair into my face. I shielded my eyes. The helicopter touched down in the middle of the perfectly manicured grass, its landing gear crushing the just-married floral arrangement. The engine began to wind down, but the blades kept spinning. The side door slid open. 2 men in black tactical suits jumped out. They didn't look like private security, they looked like special ops. They scanned the crowd with professional indifference, then turned their eyes to me. They flanked the door. And then a leg stepped out. It wasn't a combat boot, it was a designer heel. A woman stepped onto the grass. She stood tall, regal, commanding the attention of every single person in that zip code. She wasn't wearing a frayed gray coat anymore. She was wearing a tailored white suit that cost more than my parents' house. Her hair was pulled back in an elegant silver chignon. Diamonds glistened at her throat and ears, real diamonds, flawless and cold, but I recognized the face. I recognized the steel gray eyes. It was the woman from the break room. The woman I had hidden. The woman I had fed. She began to walk toward me. The crowd parted for her like the Red Sea. Mrs. Thorne, who was still dabbing at her wine-stained dress, dropped her napkin. Her mouth fell open. Madame Thorne. She whispered, her voice trembling with terror. The name rippled through the crowd. Thorne, Madame Beatrice Thorne, the matriarch, the one who controlled the entire empire, the one who hadn't been seen in public in 5 years. Beatrice ignored her daughter-in-law. She ignored my parents, who looked like they were about to faint. She walked straight up to me. The silence was absolute. The only sound was the slowing blades of the helicopter. Beatrice stopped 2 feet in front of me. She looked me up and down, seeing the wine splatters on my shirt, the tears I was fighting back, the defiance in my posture. She smiled. And for the first time that day, the sun actually felt warm. "Nia," she said, her voice amplified by the silence. "I believe you mentioned you needed capital." She extended a hand. In her palm sat a set of keys, not car keys. A heavy, iron key that looked centuries old. "I fired my personal chef this morning," she announced, turning slightly so her voice carried to the head table. "And I fired the entire board of my charitable foundation. It seems I was surrounded by people who know the price of everything and the value of nothing." She looked directly at Julian, then at Kayla. Kayla was shaking. "Grandmother," Julian squeaked. We didn't know you were coming." "Clearly," Beatrice said coldly. "You treated a queen like a servant and a servant like a queen." "I have seen enough." She turned back to me. "I am leaving for my estate in the French Riviera tonight. I need a partner who understands that true power is found in service. The job pays a starting bonus of $1 million, and," she gestured to the helicopter, "the commute beats driving a Honda." She waited, her hand still extended. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked at my mother. She was mouthing, "Nia, please, Nia, don't." I looked at my father. He looked broken. Then I looked at the helicopter. "Well," Beatrice asked, her eyes twinkling. "Are you coming, child?" I took a deep breath. I reached out and I took the key. The metal of the key was cold against my palm, but it burned with the heat of 1,000 possibilities. I didn't look back at my mother's pleading eyes. I didn't look at my father's slumped shoulders or Kayla's ruined mascara. I gripped that key, turned on my heel, and climbed into the cabin of the helicopter. The interior smelled of hand-stitched leather and expensive cologne. The noise of the rotors was muffled the moment the heavy door sealed shut, replacing the chaos of the wedding with a sudden, pressurized silence. I sank into the cream-colored seat, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Across from me, Beatrice Thorne unbuckled her seatbelt and leaned forward. She didn't look like a savior in that moment. She looked like a general who had just won a war without firing a single shot. She tapped the glass partition and the pilot nodded. We lifted off. My stomach dropped, not from fear, but from the sheer velocity of our ascent. I looked out the window. The great lawn, the white tent, the hundreds of guests, they all shrank. My family, the people who had loomed so large over my entire life, who had dictated my worth and my happiness, became nothing more than tiny, insignificant specks of dust. I watched them disappear until they were swallowed by the green of the redwoods, and then they were gone. For the first time in 28 years, I exhaled. "Don't get too comfortable," Beatrice's voice cut through my trance. She was opening a hidden compartment in the armrest, revealing a bottle of water and a tablet. "We have a 12-hour flight to Nice ahead of us on the jet, and you have a lot of reading to do." I blinked, turning to her. "Reading. You didn't think I was handing you $1 million just to be a companion, did you?" She raised an eyebrow, a small smirk playing on her lips. "I meant what I said, Nia. I saw how you managed that kitchen. I saw how you anticipated the needs of a stranger. You have the raw instincts of a leader, but you lack the polish. Over the next 2 years, I am going to grind you down and build you back up. You will learn French. You will learn corporate finance. And you will cook food that will make the Michelin Guide weep." She handed me the tablet. "This is the dossier on the Thorne Foundation's current assets. Start memorizing." I took the tablet, my hands trembling slightly. "Beatrice, Madame Thorne, why me? You could have hired anyone." Beatrice looked out the window at the horizon, her expression softening for just a fraction of a second. "Because, Nia, people who have always had power don't know what to do when they lose it. But people who have scraped for every inch, they know how to build empires. I needed a fighter. And you are a survivor." That night, as we crossed the Atlantic, I didn't sleep. I read, I studied. I left Nia the waitress behind in the clouds, and I began the work of becoming Nia the CEO. The next 2 years were a blur of exhaustion and exhilaration. We lived in Beatrice's estate outside of Antibes, a sprawling chateau overlooking the Mediterranean. It wasn't a vacation, it was boot camp. My days started at 5 a.m. I spent my mornings in the markets, learning to negotiate with fishmongers in broken French. I spent my afternoons in the boardroom of Beatrice's European headquarters, silently taking notes while she dismantled arrogant executives with a single sentence. I spent my nights in the kitchen, perfecting the fusion of Southern soul food and French technique. Beatrice was a demanding mentor. She didn't accept good enough. She threw out sauces that were slightly too salty. She made me rewrite grant proposals 10 times until the language was precise. But she never, not once, treated me like I was invisible. When I spoke, she listened. When I succeeded, she praised me. And slowly, the ghost of the girl who hid in the pantry began to fade. I didn't ask about my family. I had blocked their numbers before we even landed in France. I deleted my social media. I wanted a clean break. But 6 months into my apprenticeship, the past came knocking. We were having breakfast on the terrace, watching the sailboats bob in the harbor. Beatrice was reading the San Francisco Chronicle on her iPad. She paused, took a sip of her espresso, and slid the tablet across the table to me. "I thought you might find this interesting," she said neutrally. I looked at the screen. The headline screamed, "Thorne Vance merger collapses. Shipping heir Julian Thorne files for annulment." My breath caught. I scrolled down, reading ravenously. The article detailed the fallout of the wedding. Apparently, when Beatrice left in the helicopter, she didn't just leave the party. She froze the accounts. She had paused the transfer of the $50 million dowry that was supposed to save my parents' finances. Julian, realizing that Kayla came with debt instead of assets, had filed for an annulment 3 weeks later, citing fraud. But it got worse. Or better, depending on how you looked at it. Without the Thorne money, my parents' creditors had descended like vultures. The house in Hillsborough, the mansion they leveraged to pay for the wedding, was in foreclosure. My father's business reputation was in tatters. "They lost the house," I whispered, looking up at Beatrice. "They are currently renting a 2-bedroom apartment in Dolly City," Beatrice said, buttering her toast. "And your sister is attempting to become a lifestyle influencer, though her engagement numbers are tragic." I felt a strange cocktail of emotions. Guilt, no, sadness, maybe a little, but mostly I felt relief. The facade was gone. They were finally living the reality they had tried so hard to hide. "Do you want to send them money?" Beatrice asked, watching me closely. "You have your bonus. You could bail them out." I looked at the ocean. I thought about the way my mother had looked at Mrs. Thorne's ruined dress instead of my face. I thought about my father telling me to get out. "No," I said, pushing the tablet back. "If I bail them out, they'll never learn how to survive. They need to learn how to be coal before they can be diamonds." Beatrice smiled, a genuine, proud smile. "Excellent answer. Now finish your coffee. We have a meeting with the Minister of Culture in an hour." 2 years flew by. I was ready to come home, not as the prodigal daughter, but as a conqueror. With Beatrice's backing, I launched Soul and Spice, a high-end restaurant group and culinary academy. Our flagship location was opening in San Francisco, ironically, just a few blocks from the hotel where I used to deliver sandwiches. The opening night was the event of the season. The press was there. The food critics were there. The line wrapped around the block. I stood in the center of the dining room, wearing a custom emerald green jumpsuit that hugged every curve I used to be ashamed of. My hair was big, free, and unapologetic. I was greeting guests, shaking hands, feeling the electric buzz of success. Beatrice sat at the best table in the house, holding court, watching me with a satisfied nod. Around 9 p.m., the maitre d', a young woman named Sophie whom I had hired from a local shelter, approached me. She looked nervous. "Chef Nia," she whispered. "Yes, Sophie, is something wrong in the kitchen?" "No, chef," The kitchen is perfect, but there are some people at the back delivery entrance. Security tried to turn them away, but they're causing a scene. They say," she hesitated, looking at my face. "They say they're your family." My heart stopped for a beat, then restarted with a heavy, slow thud. The back entrance, of course, that's where they expected to find me, that's where they thought I belonged. "Did they give names?" I asked calmly. "Oilia and Langston Vance, and a younger woman, they look like they're in a bad way, chef. They're asking for leftovers." The irony was so sharp it almost cut me. 3 years ago, I was the one smuggling leftovers to a stranger. Now my parents were at my door, begging for the scraps from my table. "I'll handle it," I said. "Do you want me to call the police?" Sophie asked. "No," I smoothed the fabric of my jumpsuit. "I want to see them." I walked through the bustling kitchen. The smells of gumbo, braised short ribs, and cornbread filled the air, the smells of my heritage, elevated to royalty. The staff moved out of my way with respect. "Yes, chef," behind chef. I reached the heavy steel door of the loading dock. I took a deep breath. I wasn't the girl in the bow tie anymore. I wasn't the invisible sister. I pushed the bar and opened the door. The alleyway was damp and smelled of rain, just like that night in Saratoga. Under the harsh yellow security light, 3 figures stood huddled together. My mother was wearing a raincoat that had seen better days. Her hair was pulled back, gray showing at the roots. The helmet of perfection was gone. My father looked smaller, his suit jacket shiny with age and wear. And Kayla looked tired. She was holding a cracked iPhone, filming the ground, muttering something about content. When the door opened, they looked up. At first, they didn't recognize me. They were looking for a waitress. They were looking for someone with her head down. Instead, they saw a woman radiating power, framed by the golden light of the kitchen. We were told we could get some. My father started, his voice cracking. Then he stopped. He squinted. "Nia," my mother gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Nia, is that? Oh my God, look at you." Kayla dropped her phone to her side. Her eyes went wide, scanning my clothes, my jewelry, the confident set of my shoulders. "You own this place," she whispered. "We heard Soul and Spice was owned by the Thorne estate." "It is," I said, my voice steady and cool like the surface of a deep lake. "I'm the CEO and the executive chef." My mother let out a sob. She took a step forward, her arms opening. "Baby, oh my baby girl, we knew it. We knew you would make something of yourself. We've been so worried. Why didn't you call?" She tried to hug me. She tried to bridge the gap of 3 years and a million insults with one embrace. I took a step back. I didn't flinch. I just moved out of reach. "You knew?" I asked. "Is that why you fired me in front of 500 people? Is that why you told everyone I was the help?" My mother froze. "Nia, we were under so much pressure. You know how it is. Family forgives. Family protects," I corrected her. "You didn't protect me, you sacrificed me." My father stepped forward, wringing his hands. "Nia, please, we are having a hard time. The annulment, the bankruptcy, we lost everything. We are sleeping on a friend's couch right now. We haven't had a hot meal in 2 days." He looked at the warm kitchen behind me. He smelled the food. The hunger in his eyes was real. It was the same hunger Beatrice had in hers that night. "We just need a little help," Kayla chimed in, putting on her best sad face. "A loan, or maybe a job I could host. I'm great with people, just until we get back on our feet." I looked at them. I saw the desperation, but I also saw the entitlement still lurking beneath the surface. They didn't want to work. They wanted to be saved. They wanted to be reinstated to the comfort they felt they deserved. I had a choice. I could slam the door. I could call security and have them thrown out, just like they wanted to do to Beatrice. It would feel good. It would feel like justice. But then I remembered Beatrice's words. "True power is found in service." "Sophie," I called out over my shoulder without turning around. Sophie appeared instantly. "Yes, chef. Pack up 3 orders of the braised short ribs and the truffle mac and cheese. To go." My parents' faces lit up. My mother let out a breath of relief. Oh, thank you, Nia. Thank you. I knew you had a good heart. We can come inside and eat. My feet are killing me. No, I said, the word hung in the damp air. You cannot come inside. Their smiles faltered. The food is on the house, I continued. But the dining room is for customers, and the kitchen is for staff. You are neither. Nia, you can't be serious, Kayla whined. We're your blood. Sophie will bring the food out to you, I said. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out a business card. I handed it to my father. What is this? He asked, looking at it. That is the number for the culinary training program we run at the shelter downtown, I said. It's a 12-week course, paid apprenticeship. You start as a dishwasher, you learn prep. If you show up on time, work hard, and drop the ego, you graduate with a job placement. My mother looked at the card like it was toxic waste. A dishwasher? Nia, your father was a vice president. I was a socialite. We are not washing dishes. I washed dishes, I said softly. I polished silver until my fingers bled, and it made me who I am. If you're hungry, you'll take the food. If you want a future, you'll take the job. The choice is yours. I stepped back into the kitchen. Nia, wait, my mother screamed. You can't leave us here in the alley, Nia. I grabbed the heavy steel handle of the door. I looked at them one last time. I'm not leaving you, Mama. I'm giving you the only thing you ever gave me, an opportunity to work. I pulled the door shut. The latch clicked, a heavy final sound that echoed the closing of a chapter. I walked back through the kitchen, my heart beating steady and strong. I stopped at the pass, checked a plate of gumbo, wiped the rim, and nodded to the waiter. Service, I said. I walked out into the dining room, toward the applause, toward Beatrice, toward the life I had built from the ashes of their rejection. I didn't know if they would show up at the shelter on Monday. I didn't know if they would ever change. And for the first time in my life, I realized it didn't matter. I had fed them. I had offered them a ladder. Whether they climbed it or stayed in the dirt was entirely up to them. I sat down across from Beatrice. She poured me a glass of champagne. Handled? She asked. I clinked my glass against hers. Handled. As I took a sip, I looked out the window at the city lights of San Francisco. I was Nia Vance. I was coal that had become a diamond. And I was finally, truly full. Wow. That was the story of Nia and her journey from the back door to the boardroom. It really makes you think, doesn't it? Sometimes the people who are supposed to be your safety net are actually the ones holding you down. And sometimes, the stranger in the rain is the angel you've been waiting for. I want to know what you would have done. Would you have let your parents inside the restaurant? Or did Nia do the right thing by offering them a job instead of a handout? Let's argue in the comments. If you think she was too harsh, leave a. If you think she was a queen for setting boundaries, leave a. And don't forget to subscribe to Black Women's Soul Stories for more truth, more pain, and more power. See you in the next story.